All right, so I'll be live in just a moment. I'm just going to mention the discussion we're having, and then we'll jump right into it. Okay, I'm here today with Frankie DM, and we're going to be talking about how to get kids to play tabletop RPGs. It can be a difficult thing to teach kids how to play these games. I've tried a number of times, and I've been successful on occasion. But I've also had wild failures trying to get a imaginative tabletop RPG game off the ground with kids. And so Frankie is someone who's been doing that for a while with various different clubs. I'll let him speak into that a little more. But I'm going to prod and probe and try and get some understanding of this from his wisdom and experience. And if this is something you're trying to do with your family, your kids, your nieces, nephews, whoever, this might be a discussion that's helpful for you, because it can be difficult to get kids to try and use their imagination in a way that's not like scripted or video gamey. Give me just a moment. I'm going to post this into my Discord in case there's anyone there who wants to jump in and listen into the discussion. And let me see, escape there. Oh yeah, let's switch this over. Escape here. All right. We'll get to the discussion in just a moment. Let me just post a link to Discord. Announcements. No, I don't want to use Copilot. Let's see. View channel. Share. How's it going, Malachi? Thank you for letting me know. Howdy, good morning. All right, copy link and Control V, post. All right, let me go back into the full screen of this, and I'm going to switch us over to our conversation scene. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm on this camera now. Frankie, good morning. How is it going?
Good. I'm good over here. Yeah.
Malachi, let me know if you can hear his audio okay. I'm going to turn him up a little bit. So
Yeah.
we got talking after like a YouTube stream or something. I think maybe you had mentioned something in the chat, and so I pressed you for it, and we found some time finally between our busy Christmas schedules. And I even forgot about it this morning. And when you messaged me, I was like, oh my goodness, yeah. So I had a lot of questions for you about playing tabletop RPGs with kids, because you gave me the impression that it's something you've done at a few different clubs. Could you tell me a bit about your experience and history with that?
So, growing up, I was raised in New York City, in the Bronx, in a church where we didn't exactly have, a gaming culture, but we had a lot of nerds in the church. The pastor of the church himself was professed Star Trek fan. I mean, the pastor spoke like, if you can imagine a combination of Spock and Worf talking, like that's exactly how he talking. Oh, God bless you. How's everything going? What are you doing? How's everything today? Like every service, and you could easily pick his brain of Hebrew and Greek, literature, and then go right into, all right, what was that episode 122 of Next Generation? And he knows it off the top of his head. And my dad was the same way. And, I was always raised to just appreciate the stuff that we had, so we had a Nintendo, we, like, a lot of people didn't have it because there were other churches that were like, oh, no, my God, like, this is the devil and that's the devil,
Right.
My dad was always like, just enjoy it. You're a kid, have fun, and then when you're ready to have questions about certain things, let's talk it out, by the time I was in high school, that was the first time I came across gaming books. Like, this is back when Baldur's Gate 1 came out, and Icewind Dale came out, and then Neverwinter Nights after that. So it's like those are my first.
In the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like this is when, like, my first exposure to D&D was. I was like, I knew it was around, and like people had spoken about it, but I didn't know anything about it. So all through high school, I was like, man, I would love to like get involved in this, but in my school there was nobody doing it. So
Right.
I get out of high school, and a friend of mine, he wanted to develop his own gaming system, and he was like, hey, I'd love to have you as part of the team with like helping me play test the system. And I was like, okay, well, I've never gamed before, so and he was like, yeah, I need somebody who's never gamed before to tell me like what they think about it. I was like, sure, no problem. And then I've been gaming ever since. So,
What
um,
was the game system that they were making? Like, is it something that's been published
um,
now, or can you find that game system somewhere?
no, he's never published it. It was
Okay.
something we worked on it for years, and things just sort of over the years collapsed, and you know, a lot of us enjoyed like a lot of us that played the game, we've still gamed together, but our GM has moved on and done his
Okay.
own stuff. So,
Okay.
you know, but the system itself, he was trying to find something that sort of was in between like D&D and Palladium. So there was like an interesting mathematical system using all sorts of dice and stuff, and we had a good time with it. And then just like it was a lot of heavy play testing. So we played games. Let me see. We used to meet Monday nights at a Burger King from 7 p.m. till closing, and like the workers knew us there by
Yeah.
name after like the third week of doing that. So we were there like for years because I started when I was 19. We stopped gaming at the Burger King when I was like, I think like 25, 26. So we played like whole campaigns around like the Burger King table.
That's really cool.
um, yeah, like the manager at one point would like close the door and be like, "Yeah, no, all the customers are allowed in, but since you guys are inside, you're okay. We'll just leave you here while we clean up, and then when we close, you guys head out." Um, but we were just like trying to figure out ways because most of our group we're all Christian, but from different churches and different denominations.
Mm.
So like one of my friends was Catholic, one of them was Presbyterian, two or three of them were from Assemblies of God, and I was like the independent church. So
Non-denominational.
um,
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like we were
Yeah.
all just trying to figure out like as Christians, how can we sort of be nerdy, be geeky, but also not be sort of lumped in with this like groups of people that are like, oh well, they're a cult and that's a cult, and
Mm.
it was bolstering to our faith at the time where we were like, okay, well, I can feel like I enjoy reading comic books and still be a Christian. Like
Mm.
I don't have to like argue with somebody that, oh yeah, I read comic books, and they're like, oh well, that's well, the Bible says, and leave me
Right.
alone. Just let me read my comics.
Right.
um but at one point, I had gone to film school. It didn't work out, and I needed a job right away. And my friend who was developing the game, he said, "Listen, I work at a tutorial program. They need somebody to take over their third grade cohort, and I think you'd be fantastic for it." So I went to go work with him, and in working with him, I got to see how he would use gaming with the junior high school kids
What did
as an
what did he
educational aid.
what did he do?
Well, when I came in, he had already been there a year and a half or so. So he already had a group established. But he would meet with them, and he had like, they had sort of like a club time where
Hmm.
like if girls wanted to do, they had like a makeup club. They would go and learn to do, makeup. If they had ones that wanted to do this, they would do that. And he had the gaming club. Um, and
And
he
this
had a
was
really good
an
knack.
after school program.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was an after
Okay.
school tutorial program.
Okay.
Um, excuse me.
Mhm.
So he had this really good knack for like just sort of picking out like while talking with kids and knowing I think you'd be great for this, you know.
Mm.
And he would just go, like, and even no matter how like, being in the city, no matter how tough, no matter how thug they acted,
Hmm.
he would sit with them and talk with them and be like, I think you like gaming, you should give it a shot. And like
Mm.
they'd come over because they were interested, and then they would get stuck in because they are like, actually, this is kind of fun, and all right, and then they would ask questions. So what are the dice for? Okay, and what's this piece of paper for? And what's all this stuff on the paper? He
Mm.
would like explain to them bit by bit. Or if he already had a group established, he would let the other kids explain it, which was even more phenomenal because he like a kid would come and be like, okay, so what's all this stuff? And one of the staff would go, hey, mister, can I explain it? And like they would explain it for him. And
Mm.
anything that they would, like can't figure out, he would explain, for the group. Um, and it really opened my eyes to the fact that gaming is really a good avenue to use as an educational aid. And
Right.
the best way that I can give an example of it is you can go to anybody who is older than you and say, hey, when you were in school, what did you learn? and they'll say math, they'll say reading, this, that. They might even have a story of their teacher. But if you ask them, what games did you play when you hung out with your friends? Like I've had people that were in their 70s telling me stories of, I was playing Johnny on the Pony, and there was me, there was Paul, there was Josh, and there was this one time we went sledding down this hill and we crashed into a fence. Like, and the details are there,
Right.
So the idea that we had was like, how can you use gaming as an educational aid, get the kids to hide historical facts in there, or really get them to do research without them realizing they're doing research, and it's a skill that they can carry with them. And he had his philosophy on it. And for me, when there was a time that I worked in an after school program, I had a group of sixth graders who were held back. They were supposed to be eighth graders.
Oh, 2 years.
Yeah, they were 2 years held back.
Wow. Okay.
When I came into the program was in a really bad neighborhood in the Bronx. I mean, day one, my supervisor was like, "Well, everybody, October is gang initiation month, so make sure you watch your backs and have a nice day." It was like, "Well, thanks for that, vote of confidence."
Right.
But we were just given groups of kids like, "Oh, this is your group. Take them and go do something with them." And I was like, "Well, like I just got hired. What do I do with them? Do whatever you want."
Figure it out. Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So I had the kids in the classroom, and I got the impression that they liked, shooter games. They liked Skyrim was actually one that they actually had mentioned. They were like, "Oh, I like it. It's just I'm not sure how to get into it." I was like, "Okay, all right." So I was like, "So do you guys like video games as a whole, or as like a specific, type of game?" And got them talking about just, what aspects of gaming they liked. And then I was like, "Well, I'm gonna bring something in tomorrow, and we're gonna try something out." And I brought in D&D fourth edition.
Okay.
Because that was the first D&D system that I ran. I know a lot of people might hate on it, but
Sure.
it was the first one that I ran on. And I used the character builder on my laptop, let them build their characters, printed those up in the office, came back, and I was like, "Okay, so this is your character, this is who you are." We had like these notebooks around from the site. They were just there for staff to grab. So I grabbed a notebook for each student, and I told them, "Here's a glue stick. Glue your character sheet onto the cover of the inside cover of your book. I'm going to ask you every day one question. You have to answer it as your character." And they would have to sit there. So I looked online for tons of like questions for character development that a regular gamer would use to try and figure out backstory type stuff. And just once a day when I would come in with them, okay, what was your character's favorite thing to do as a kid? And they would sit there and, "Oh, I never really would have thought that." But now the hard part was that they were held back twice because they couldn't read and they couldn't write. So they were afraid of writing. So I had to get them out of that habit. I was like, "Listen,
what do you mean they were afraid of writing? Like because they failed at doing it, and so it was like a source of a sense of shame or weakness or something for them?
Yeah, a bit of that. Because like they couldn't spell, so they were like always, and the kids that could spell would make fun of them. And even though they were like bigger and a little more, stocky,
Right.
they were upset at being bullied because of what everybody said was their intelligence level. I'm like, that's not your intelligence level. And I had to remind them, don't let anybody else's impression of you be what limits you. And little by little, I got to know each of them and figure out what hobbies do you want to do? What things do you want to get into? If nothing was in the way, what would you do down the line? As if you could do it as a career. And one of the kids that I really connected with, he was very much into swimming. He loved Bruce Lee movies. He loved, old, Chinese kung fu flicks, and I was like, okay, that's my inroads right there. I was like, yeah, I love martial arts. I've been doing jujitsu since I was 14. I do Tang Sudo, and, me and my friends, we sword fight, and I showed him pictures of us sword fighting in Central Park.
Yeah.
And he was like, wait, he was like, you do that? And I was like, yeah. He was like, I didn't think adults did silly stuff like that. And I was like, have you ever had somebody chase you with a sword down a road? And he goes, no. I said, it's not silly when somebody's chasing you with a sword. Like this, it's serious business. But I was able to connect with him and just get him to realize, look, if when you write in your journals, don't worry about spelling. Just get the words out. However you think it sounds to you, write it out. We'll do correction afterwards. And I only worked at that site for maybe 6 months before I had an injury that I had to like pull out of the site. But in those 6 months, I had them journaling every day, as their characters. And I'd say maybe we do 1 week of journaling.
Mhm.
The following week, we'd start off the Monday with, all right, we're gonna edit our stuff, and I would show them how to correct their stuff. What was amazing to me was that I wanted to find out why they were stuck behind. So I asked my supervisor, can I come into the school during the daytime and shadow their teacher?
Mm.
And she said, no problem, just make an appointment with the teacher and come in. And when I did that, their teacher was sadly a product of an old mentality in the New York education system,
What's that?
where
Oh yeah, okay, go ahead.
his mentality was, I'm tenured, so I don't have to teach. So when I got there, the kids were off the wall, and I was like, you don't have curriculum ready for them. Like, I know for a fact 3 of your kids are failing right now. And he was like, well, they can't fire me because I'm tenured,
Ooh,
and
man,
it
that's
was something
so
that it
dark.
frustrated the heck out of me,
That's so
so that
dark.
made me all the more want to help these kids at least get out of junior high school. Like, I'm like, there's no
Right,
reason that you should be an eighth grader stuck in sixth
right.
grade, stuck in sixth grade, so I had them, we were playing D&D, just generic missions that were in the books. Like, I didn't even create any special campaigns or like, I
Sure.
just, this is your character, you're going through this, what happens next, and they had a great time playing it, but they actually enjoyed reading to each other what their characters
Mm.
journals are. So
Really?
they were like, oh, that's what your character did. Oh, okay, well, my character, when he was younger, he was into this, and that's why he likes fishing now. Oh, that's
Mm.
awesome. Okay. And like, it started a lot of good discussion.
Right.
And then one of them asked, so, Mr., like, are there other games than this? And I said, thank you for asking that question. There are tons of games. Like I said, I'm doing this one because this is the one I'm learning right now, and I would love to see how you guys respond to it. And if you guys didn't respond well, I would have brought another one in.
Mm.
But seeing that you guys are taking to this one, what type of game would you want to try?
Mm.
And like I said, I wasn't there very long, so I didn't even get to try any other games with them.
Sure.
But we did D&D and we did Mouse Guard.
Oh, okay. I've heard of Mouse Guard. I haven't played it, but I've heard of it.
Okay, yeah. Because I think what worked well with it was because I had the graphic novels.
Okay.
We were able to come in and like they were able to pass it around and look it over, and they were like, actually, this looks pretty cool, like an epic story with small creatures, And I was like, would you guys want to try the game? And they said, sure, And we were able to just throw a random map out on the table and have them move around little, red and blue and green pieces around the boards to show where their characters are going and whatnot.
Can I?
And it was.
Can I jump in for just a second? Because you highlighted two things that were very interesting to me, because the inroad that I have taken when I approach tabletop RPGs is a bad inroad, and that is the war game aspect of them. Because I kind of started with D&D 5th edition, which is a little bit war gamey, all the grid and the tight mathematics and stuff, and eventually trickled my way into like more rules light type of games. But the thing that you highlighted that was very interesting, one, you posed the idea, it's almost essential, like you encouraged the kids or your friend had this approach of encouraging the kids, going, I think you'd be good at ... right? Playing a paladin, being a healer or something. There's an aspect of that where you've piqued the kids' interest. Wait, what is it you think I'd be good at? Like teach me about this thing you think I'd be good at. I think that's a really good inroad. And the second thing that you mentioned was focusing on the character aspect and getting the kids to kind of ask questions about their character. And there's obviously an adjacent potential there, which is to get the kids to talk about themselves, right? Like
Exactly.
you get them going, here are the dreams and aspirations my character has. As a listener, I bet those might be dreams and aspirations you have. I mean? Like
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
so but I just wanted to highlight those two things. That is like one that's immediate. I'm not taking it like as a rebuke, but I'm taking it as good correction. Like, oh yeah, I have failed to do that. I'm thinking about my nephew. I'm thinking about my son's friend. People that I have failed to get into TTRPGs, and going, ooh, I bet you would really like playing a paladin. I bet you would really enjoy this type of character, and then trying to have them flesh out why this character is a righteous knight of the order of whatever, and why they defeat demons and save, peasants or whatever. Like, what is the reason they do this? But I interrupted you. You were continuing on telling me some of the history of doing this, and you mentioned earlier that you had an injury that you had to stop this after school program. But would you mind telling me a little bit more about this after school program? I'd kind of like to know what happened with those kids that were stuck in the junior high. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, like from then, like it had been years that I was doing different sites and stuff like that. And I got a message on Facebook from the one that I really connected with. Ariel, if you're watching this, okay, keep it up, man. And he messaged me and said, Mr. Frankie, I want to thank you because nobody else believed in me. And now I got the job I wanted. I wanted to teach swimming. I'm a lifeguard for the New York lifeguard system during the summers, and I teach swimming at a local a pool. And I was like, that's what I want to hear. You didn't have to thank me, but I'm thankful that you did. Because the hard part is in education, I know, especially after that encounter, like I know a lot of teachers don't get thanked enough. So I literally went back. I looked on Facebook, I looked on LinkedIn, and found a bunch of my old teachers, and I just started saying, "Hey, I want to thank you."
Wow.
Because I'm like, I knew that for me, it did so much for me. Just knowing that I was able to impact this one kid's life that much. And he told me, he was like, "Yeah, the rest of us, we all just finished high school." And he goes, "Some of them, I don't know what they did with themselves, but he goes, I know I'm not really gonna go to college, but I'm gonna focus on my career." And he wanted to be like his older brother, who was a lifeguard and a swim coach. And I was like, if that's what you want to do, go for it. I said, you have the talent, you have the capability. Don't let anybody limit your mind. And even if you don't want to do school right now, you can do that later on. You can figure out what else you want to do. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, you have to make a decision right now. It's never too late to do something new. But you found your passion and you're enjoying it. Run with it. And keep running with it. So it's one of those things that you don't realize how like small things like that will affect somebody in the long term, and like that's really what lent, like, after, because I had left that site, I worked at another school where this is where, and the one that I had mentioned, I was featured in Mongoose Publishing's online magazine, and I was using Lone Wolf, the RPG.
Right, you mentioned that. And when you mentioned it, I was like, oh, I think I played the PlayStation game version of that, which is kind of like a choose your own adventure RPG or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Back in the 80s, that game had come out. It was a bunch of books, and I only had like maybe one or two of them that my dad had from when he was a kid. He gave them to me as I grew up, and they were good books. I enjoyed playing them as a kid. And I didn't realize that it was the same game. So I started reading through. I was like, wait a minute, this is the exact same thing. And I come across it because in New York City, there's not too many gaming stores, so Barnes and Nobles has stuff and stuff like that. But there's like the one that I always went to, that my friend brought me to, was the Complete Strategist. This tiny store, packed, like it's something straight out of an RPG. Like it's packed wall to wall with games and ancient tomes.
Mostly like a war game, because the Strategist brings to mind like maybe it's a Warhammer store or something. Okay.
They do both. Like there's wargaming materials, there's RPG materials, and like different walls have different games, and the further back you go, the older the games get.
Wow. Is this store still there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's one of the few that's still in Manhattan.
Okay.
There's a couple of other ones, but that one is like, if you're ever in New York City, Complete Strategist on 33rd.
Okay.
Amazing little shop. I think Thursday night they do their game night where they actually have their home D&D group playing in the back, and you can hear them doing goofy stuff. But like every dice that I've bought, every book that I've bought in the store, I've gone to that store. Great little shop. So I was walking through the store and I found the Lone Wolf book there, and it's like 100 pages, maybe 110 pages at most, so it's really small. Picked it up, and I was working at a Boys and Girls Club. This is just around the time when the what's it called? The earthquake hits Japan and the Fukushima incident happens.
Yeah.
And being a martial artist, like I was just like, man, I really feel bad about Japan. I don't know what to do. And my job had just hired me to. I was originally a coat check, and then they upgraded me to be the. Everybody said that I was essentially hired then to be the lunch lady. So I was there serving the afternoon snack to the kids, which included like a small sandwich, a fruit, juice cup, and like a snack. So I have all these plates out, and what I noticed is the kids were coming in, grabbing a plate, taking one thing that they want and dumping the rest of the stuff.
Mm.
And I was like, I saw the first time, I was like, all right, maybe just that one kid. Then the second kid did. I was like, all right, this has got to stop. And I said, all right, here's what's going to change. I said, every day I got to pick up a mess after you kids because you're dropping food all over the floor. You're throwing it in the garbage. You're only taking one thing. And I said, right now across the world, there are kids that don't have food. And they would greatly appreciate the food you're throwing in the garbage. So from now on, you want a snack, you're going to come up, you're only going to grab what you want. If you don't want the whole plate, don't take the whole plate. Just grab what you want and move it on. Okay? Because I don't need somebody to throw good food in the garbage. I said, secondly, to show your appreciation, I'm going to have you guys clean up after yourselves because it's not fair to the rest of the staff to clean up your mess. Okay? I said, third, we're going to do a Japanese appreciation club. And they were like, what? And I said, yeah, because Japan just had an earthquake and they would definitely appreciate the food you're throwing in the garbage. So it started with that. And then my supervisor at the time, she worked with me at the previous site. And she goes, I already see what you're doing and I love it. I'm not going to let anybody know what you're doing. You just go ahead and keep running with the program. Okay. So I had the kids doing that. We were watching anime. We were learning basic Japanese. We were writing, in kanji and kana. Then they were like, well, we're trying to figure out how do we do a better literacy program. What do you have? And I said, do you want me to do gaming with the kids? I said, I've done it before and it had some success. And she was like, yes. What do you need? And I said, buy me dice. Like that's just buy me a whole box of dice. And then I just went through when the kids were coming around, listening to them, and I figured out which ones I figured could use the time in a gaming group. And I had two groups of kids that were from ages 5 to 9. And the lone wolf, I have the.
Well, that's actually a lot younger than I had conceptualized, because 5 to 9 that is a wrestle. Like that is an intense wrestle. Trying to keep let's just go 7. Trying to keep a 7-year-old. I'm assuming so. The time period wise, this is around 2010. No.
2010, around there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so these kids probably don't have smartphones yet, but it's coming. But still, like a 7-year-old in 2010 is like, woo, you know what I mean? Like it's, yeah.
Yeah. We had,
right.
we had a computer lab that at the time was up to date. And the kids were always going in there and trying to find like these flash games to play on the computer all the time. And then once the computer lab was closed, they couldn't play them anymore. And I was like, well, you guys like video games. Why don't we talk about other types of games? And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I started off with board games. Did you guys like board games? And a lot of them, by this time, people aren't really playing board games as much. Like now adults do it more because I mean, a lot of us, I mean, at least as a kid, my family had board game night. Like every Wednesday night, we were playing board games together, whether we had a good week or a bad week. Like it was just, we knew Wednesday night we were going to be playing Clue, Monopoly, Scrabble, or something,
right?
And we were probably going to be throwing tabletop pieces at each other because we were angry with each other, but we were going to be having game night, So I was like, all right, let's start off there. And I started off with Clue. I figured it was the easiest one. They can get an idea of, okay, you're playing this character, you're in a house, this happens, how do you figure it out? And from there you can really see, okay, like getting them thinking, okay, what skill would you use to figure out these things? And get like I had a massive, post-it note where I was writing down ideas they had on the post-it note and just sticking it to the wall afterwards. And then I was like, okay, now what else did I do? I put on, I can't remember which movie I put on. It was a cartoon, a fantasy cartoon that I put on for movie night at the job, and watching them with that. And then I was like, okay, you guys saw the movie. Do you guys think you would play a game like that? And they were like, actually, yeah, we would. So I think I put on Princess Mononoke.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So very fantasy elements, lots of mystical, magical type stuff. And they were like, yeah, I like this. Would you play a game like that where you're like sort of like a knight or something like that? And they said, yeah, sure, that sounds good. And I just got those same groups together, broke them into 2 teams, and brought out Lone Wolf. And with Lone Wolf, the character creation is very easy. So it wasn't like use a character creator. They actually sat down and I had found a PDF of the book because I had the book already and I purchased a PDF. So I went and just threw it up on the screen on the computer and said, okay, character creation, let's go. And I got them to sort of sit there and look through everything on the screen and then fill out the character sheets all together at one time. And then from there, it was like, okay, so what questions do you have? And somebody, Mr. Frankie, what does this skill mean? All right, let's
Mm.
talk it out. Read it out for me. What do you think it means?
Well, that's
And I give
good.
them like they would, yeah, I'd let them
That's
tell me
good.
what they think it
Let
means
them
first.
try and interpret the information. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's actually that's smart because you put the ownership of the understanding on them by trying to discern things. You know, and of course they're going to get some things wrong, but then you can correct it. At least
Exactly.
you're getting their brain going. I feel like I know what strength does. I feel like I know what
Yeah,
acrobatics might be. Right? Okay. Interesting.
exactly.
Good. Good.
Exactly.
Okay.
A lot of the time, that's the approach that I try to take is like, what do you think this means? And
Hmm.
especially if you know where their comprehension is,
Hmm.
their comprehension level with reading, they'll sit there and look it over and be like, oh, well, it sounds like, and okay, and I'll be like, that's
Hmm.
close. And let me give you a better example. And like leaving them with an example helps them to sort of conceptualize it better instead of telling them, oh, strength is this.
Right.
I'll be like,
Right.
strength is like if I want to lift this stack of chairs, I would use strength to lift this stack of chairs.
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
and then they're like, oh, okay, okay, okay. I thought you meant like if you were going to use a baseball bat to hit a baseball.
Hmm.
Well, strength plays a role in that, but your dexterity might do better with that one because you got to keep your eye on the ball.
Hmm.
And they're like, oh, got it, got it, got it. So little things like that I would try and use to get them to figure it out.
Hmm.
While I'm there, and then say, okay, what else do you think? Um, and then from there we tried the I think there's 3 missions in the Lone Wolf book.
Okay.
And we did those first 3 missions, and then they had just came out with one called I think it was the Shadows of Darkness or something like that. Like it was the next big one, based on stuff from the actual game books. So we got to that first mission there, and the kids by that point were so invested. They were like, all right, first we want to write a thank you letter to the publisher and to the author. Second, can we make a video because we think other kids would like this if they knew what it was? So someplace on my YouTube channel, there's like this old video from forever ago, of these kids playing this game that they called it like this. They said this is our commercial, and we hope other kids like it.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's fantastic, perfect, go for it. So we did that, um, and that was with Lone Wolf. And when that site, I was there for like a year and a half. And I had done this with that group of kids, and then they had asked me to do it with some of the older kids. So I was doing it with high school kids after that. The high school kids were a little harder to get interested because it was a boys and girls club. There's stuff to do all over the building. There's
Oh,
pool
okay. A lot of
tables. There's
distractions.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
basketball.
Mhm.
Indoor soccer. Like they had stuff to do. So we had like 3 of them who were like. One of them was actually a basketball player. He came down to grab one of his friends. He goes, Mister, are you like, what are you doing? Like, what is that stuff on the table? And I told him, oh, these are math rocks. And he said, what? I said, they're dice. And he came over and he was like, oh, what do you do with them? Because like, I've never seen dice like this. He goes, and being from the Bronx, he said, I've only seen dice that my uncle uses to make bets on the street. And I'm
Hmm.
like, yeah, well, there's more you can do with dice than that. Okay. So once he came and sat down, his friends came and was like, oh, you coming back to the game? He goes, no, here, take the ball. He gave him the basketball. He
Hmm.
stayed there, sweaty and everything, and
Hmm.
wanted to learn how to game.
Really?
And
How did you
yeah, he
get
was.
in with so he's a sporty kid. Like he doesn't he likes doing physicality. How did you get him to like what else did you say to him, or was it just like he wanted to know what this was? Like
He,
or was there
he
more that you
yeah,
said like to kind of get him into a character or something?
he genuinely wanted to know what we were doing because I had, I think, 2 kids at that time that were in part of the computer club that saw me sitting down with my game books while I was overseeing the computer stuff.
Hmm.
And like that's another thing that I like. If I'm on a site where I can have my stuff out, I have my game books out on the table. I have my
Hmm.
bag of dice on the table. I have my notebooks and my like. I'll sit there and draw maps with the
Hmm.
kids around so they can go, well, what is that? Like I like getting the conversation started by letting them
Hmm.
see what I'm doing, and then from there letting them like, oh, okay, so this is part of a game. Yes, this is part of a game.
Hmm.
And answering
Okay.
their questions little by little and generating interest by them seeing what I do.
Hmm.
Um, so we had done. I was sitting there playing with those kids, and this one guy just saw us because he went to get somebody else, and he had to pass through the computer lab to get this person. And he goes, I mean, what are those? Like he literally was just genuinely interested in the dice.
Yeah.
Um, and then came over and wanted to know more, and that was it. Like once he asked me questions, and I was like, oh yeah, this is part of a game. I don't know if you ever heard of, Dungeons and Dragons or, Palladium or anything like that, but it's a pen and paper role playing game. And I said, do you like books? And he goes, well, not really, mister. And I said, all right, do you like comics? He was like, I mean, a little more than regular books, but I was like, okay, think of your favorite comic. If you think of a game as a comic, right? The author is the storyteller, the main storyteller. So that would be the game master. You guys are the characters in the story. The difference between this and your comic is the comic has a story that goes from beginning to end. With this one, I have an idea of where I'd like the story to end up, but it's up to you to get there. And however you get there, however long it takes, that's the adventure, is figuring out how you get there. You can do it in 10 minutes and be like, oh, we just want to go straight there, and that's fine. Or you can do a ton of other stuff. And he said, like a video game. I said, very much like a video game, just that instead of using like a computer, we're sitting here talking it out, and you guys get to develop the world together. And he goes, that's dope. Can I join?
That's cool.
And I said, sure.
Did you end up getting a game going with this group at the Girls and Boys Club?
It wasn't very long because when I started working with the high school, it was around the same time that Regents Week was coming up. So like they were there maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then you have Regents Week where you have the Regents test coming up, and they were like, oh, we got to study. And I was like, that's fine, no problem. And then they moved me from that department to another department. So I didn't get to see them as much after that. But for the times that we had them, we had a pretty good game going for those 3 weeks. It was like, I want to say maybe 5 or 6 sessions that we were able to get there.
Okay.
And they had a really good time with it. Even the sporting kid who was like, yeah, no, I'm really enjoying this. By the time that the last time I saw him, he was showing up with a notebook, with a pencil. He was like, I don't even show up to school with a pencil or a notebook, mister. I'm here for you. And I was like, okay, well, I'm glad. You should show up to school with your notebook and pencil still.
Yeah. Have you encountered a kid, because you've described a few different ranges of kids, like not just the range of ages, and like the age that you highlighted, that is like a harder age to get kids to pay attention to. But then you've also mentioned athletic, less intellectual, or less like educationally focused kids. Those I've noticed can also be difficult to get to play games. When I've done this last year, I did Camp Agape, California, and got together with kids. There's a wide range of age. I brought the game Zombie Dice, which I got a recommendation from a guy named Rivers, and he suggested this game would be good for kids, and I bought it, took it with me. But the reason why it worked is because it's kind of like gambling. Like you're trying to collect brains, but if you get too many shotguns in the face, you die. So it's like, and you're collecting the brains, and it's like, if you ever get 3 shotguns, you've died. So the kids really got into it. I had the thought to try and, okay, maybe I could try and get an RPG going. But again, you mentioned like the Boys and Girls Club. There's a lot of different things to do. Same thing with Camp Agape. But the point was, have you had kids that you've encountered that you haven't been able to get interested? I mean, obviously there's kids like that are just not interested at all, and that you haven't really tried to press on them. But have you ever had a kid where you started engaging with them, and then like you've struggled to keep their attention in that space, and maybe you overcame it? Like, I'd like to hear more about that.
So at another site that I worked at, because I bounced around to a lot of different sites over the years, and one of the places that I worked for was it was a program that we had. Let's see, I think we had 20 sites across the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. And I was at one in the Bronx. And they had me working with the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders at different times throughout the week. And a friend of mine, the same one that got me into gaming, he was running a group with the 5th graders. And I had the 3rd graders and 4th graders. He was using Savage Worlds.
Okay.
And I was trying to, because in the neighborhood, the big problem was that kids just weren't interested in reading. So literacy was a problem. So I brought in Mouse Guard because I was like, it's got a game to it already. It is a comic book, but it's a heavy comic book. It's pretty dense material for them to get through, but it's still a comic. A nice epic fantasy story, but with mice. So got them into that, and the kids liked the comic. And then I asked her, so who wants to play the game? And a couple of them did want to, and other ones want to do other stuff, and that was fine. And we had one kid who he didn't feel comfortable doing anything, but we were telling him, my partner, Taina, she was doing like jewelry making, and then it was either you were going to be doing jewelry making or you're going to be doing the gaming with me, or there's going to be board game time. He didn't want to play board games. He didn't want to do jewelry making. So he was like, fine, can I just sit and watch?
Right.
I said, sure, you come sit and watch, if you want, you write up a character with us just as an exercise, and what started off was like, he would sit there and he would sort of bother the other kids while we were trying to get the gaming session going. So it was like, all right, look, you're going to be here. They're focusing on the game because they actually want to be here. I know you don't want to be here, but at least respect the space, and he was like, fine, whatever, and just sat there the entire time like this. And it wasn't until like maybe the third or fourth week that we were doing this that with Mouse Guard, what I like is they have what's it called? It's like there's like these short-term goals and these long-term goals that your character can have.
Sure.
So the short-term goals can like change session to session, while the long-term goals are something that you're trying to in the campaign try and get done. So while trying to get the kids to understand that, I was like, okay, so does anybody want to change their short-term goal? And one of the characters goes, I think I understand what you mean. Like, do I want to, help deliver bread today? And that's like what my short-term goal is. Like, okay, yeah. And then that kid goes, so a long-term goal would be like, if I wanted to build a town. And I said, yes.
Okay.
And he was just sitting there and like, it took him a while to sort of warm up to it. But just saying, you don't have to like really, if you just want to sit and watch, you can do that too. You can spectate, you don't have to be a part of the game. You can sit and like follow along with us while we game. I'm okay with that. Just you can't be causing trouble for everybody else, because if you weren't going to be sitting here with me, you were going to be going to the board game tables and just bothering everybody there while they're actually quiet. And then you weren't going to be doing the jewelry making with Miss Taina, so just stay over here. If you want to read a book, if you want to sit and just listen, that's fine. If you have questions, you can ask questions. That's fine. I just left the space open for him to really just sit there. And at first he seemed bored out of his mind, but when he saw that we were actually telling a story each session and like it was progression and the characters can develop, I think by week 3 or 4 that he was like, he came to me on his own. He's like, Mister, can I make a character? And I was like, I'm sorry, can you say that louder? And he was like, can I make a character? I said, yeah, sure, you can make a character. I said, but you realize that you're also going to have a journal and you're going to have to answer questions like everybody else. He goes, yeah, but I mean, like, it's fun. Like, it seems fun. I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like, even if you don't, like, if you want to, join for one session and you feel like I want to sit out the next session, that's fine too. I just leave them the space to really, get into it as they want to. Like, you don't have to dive in, completely. But this is the way we're doing it. And if you want to join us, if you just want to sit and listen, go ahead and sit and listen. I'm okay with that. And it worked with Mouse Guard because I was able to keep bouncing back and forth from, all right, this is what's happening in the books. We just finished this issue. All right, now let's go into the game. This is happening between this time and this time. What do you guys want to do? And a lot of it is really me asking a lot of the time was asking them, what do you want to do? And have them really figure out, and like I drop situations on them. So like with Mouse Guard, there's like time markers that you use for the weather.
Okay.
And after a certain amount of weather events, the next season starts. So you can be in the middle of spring, and if somebody rolls for weather watching and flubs a roll, it can cause like, oh, well, you didn't see the rainstorm came, so I can drop a rainstorm on them. And for mice, that's a big deal. They're like trying to go through waters that are raising right up above their heads. But if you technically, according to the rulebook, if you do that like too many times, then you hit the 3 season markers, and well, spring is over, and you're now going into fall, or summer.
Okay.
And then like you go from there, and like that's where I'm like, okay, it can get a little hairy because it can happen too fast. So I try to like, do the GM thing and sort of flub the rolls a little bit. Like, all right, we're going to hold this off a little bit.
Okay.
But they had a good time trying to figure out, wait, so the season is changing? I said, yeah, just like now, season is changing. And you noticed it, you guys are the ones that their job was to maintain the roads between the towns. So they were literally like out there every day digging, to make sure that there was ways. Like one was like, oh, can I dig like trenches for the water to run down when it rains. I said, yeah, you guys can do that.
Mm.
And like I left it up to them to figure out what do you guys want to do to like maintain the road. You know,
Mm.
if there's going to be constant rain, what do you guys want to do? Oh, can we do this? Can we do that? And we could
Right.
try it out. Sure, why not?
Right.
You know,
It it
and
sounds like
then
so regarding the kid that you encountered that had like some pushback and resistance. Um, when you're telling this story, I was kind of waiting for you to say like that you dumbed down the requirements, but then when you mentioned like you're gonna have to keep a journal, you're gonna have to write down stuff, I was like, oh, you kept the bar the same and
Mhm.
made it so the kid had to approach that bar, which I'm like, that's interesting because that's also something that I
Mhm.
have failed to do with kids is maintain the standard practice of entrance. And I'm not sure what to do with that. Like, okay, so let's see, because I think you're right. I think there is an aspect of it where you still have to require the players to engage with the participation that a player participates with, right? Like, if you allow
Mhm.
people to join your table and they're just on their telephone all day long, it's like, there's it's not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for the DM. It's not good for the game.
Yeah.
So there's some aspects of that where it's like, no, there should be a bar, and if you take the bar away, you diminish what the potential of the experience is. So I like that, and I probably am going to lean more into that. But my thought is at the same time, how do you okay, so a kid today who's played Roblox and is watching YouTube streamers and they're saying bruh, I'm like, okay, I'm not saying they're necessarily different than a 2013, 2017, whatever. I'm not saying they're
Yeah.
necessarily different, but I don't know, like there are aspects of it where it's very difficult to get the kid even to look at the thing you're doing because this kid doesn't actually understand real attention. They don't know how to pay attention, and throughout much of their life, they've never been given real attention. They've been
Mhm.
given tertiary or adjacent attention, or a parent, or a friend, or a brother, or someone looking over the shoulder going, yes, I see the show you're watching. Yes, I see the game you're playing. I'm doing my own thing, though. And it's like all this parallel play stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, I like the thing you've said. Set the bar, go with character, ask them
Mhm.
questions about their character. Like these are all stepping stones, but I'm still
Mhm.
seeing a hurdle. And the hurdle is attention or something. But it sounds
Mhm.
like you may have also answered that in the sense where you talked about you have this group time and you just go, no, you don't get to do other stuff. You get to watch us have fun. Tell me
Yeah.
more about that. Like how, you were about to say something and I interrupted, but I just wanted to interject that I'm like, I really like the feedback you've been giving me and that point that you made about not lowering the bar. And it
Mhm.
just, I wanted to highlight that. But you were about to say something, and I don't want to hear you keep going.
Yeah, when at least for when it came to like the places that I worked at, we were given, like if I'm going into a place and they're like, oh, well, if you can run a club, what kind of club would you run? Like I right away tell the supervisors, I do pen and paper role playing games, and I can keep the kids, engaged in groups of like, I think at the most I've done with kids was about 10 because
Mm,
it can get really crazy.
sure.
But I would typically say I can do groups of 5 different days of the week. So even if every day of the week I'm meeting with different kids, so Monday is group A, through whatever, and I like it's going to be every Monday is going to be with this group, every Tuesday is going to be with that group. Um, I can do that much easier, and I can keep those kids engaged for as long as we need to, because if they're willing to play this game, if they're willing to create this story, what I would try to do is just make sure that like that space is our safe space. The kids
Mm,
know every week at this time during this time slot, we're gaming.
mm,
So you have the opportunity to go do another club. That's fine, but we're going to be here. And if you want your character to develop, we're going to be doing that in this time, and
right.
that's the only time slot you have. Not that you can never do anything else. You can go ahead and do another thing. Life happens, or sometimes your interests change, and that's fine. But at least let us know. That way we can say, you know what, we know we're not going to see you again. Or maybe you want to switch out for a different day, and I can switch another player to your time slot.
Mm,
And I would leave it up to the kids to really decide, do you really want to get into this?
mm,
And a lot of the programs that I was at, like they were sort of forced to pick up a club in September and had to stick with it from September to December. You know, so they knew once I picked this club, I'm going to be here from this time to this time every week, every 2 days, whatever. You know, so that's where the with a program, it was easier for me to like get that
Right.
together.
Right.
As long as I did a decent description of what the club was going to be doing, um, the kids were usually interested. And what I've found is, so I recently got hired by my local YMCA, and I'm supposed to be starting with their actual program in January.
Okay.
So the last 5 years, I've been a stay-at-home dad.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, like the 5 years before that, I was, or 3 years before that, I was in an office in Manhattan, working full time.
Okay.
So I hadn't been with kids for at least the last 8 years.
Yeah.
Um, but what I'm seeing is I feel like there's the way to get the kids interested is trying to get them into, like, get them with the interest they have now. So almost every kid I know now has watched Stranger Things. You know, so
Really?
my younger
Okay.
brother is, let me see, I think he's 15,
Okay.
right? He just started in high school. And he's always seen me like just being geeky, and I always had my books and stuff like that. But he recently watched Stranger Things, I think within the last year, and he was like, "Is that what you and your friends do?" And I said, "Yes, that's exactly what me and my friends do, including fighting Demogorgons. We do that too."
Mm.
You know. And he's been more interested in it, you know. And my family's recently moved out of New York City, but my brother still wants to try and game, you know. So I'm like, okay, I know you like Stranger Things, so you know the types of stories they do. But I said I also do. I said I know you like Ghostbusters. I have a game you can play Ghostbusters pretty much, you know.
Mm.
I know you like Ninja Turtles. I have a game you could play Ninja Turtles with, you know. Like you got to let me know what type of game you want to run,
Mm.
and then we'll pick a time slot where, you know, we can go on Discord together and game together.
Right.
So now it's been him and my nephew, who both are, they're into, you know, Minecraft, Roblox, and everything.
Mm.
I'm waiting for them to really let me know what type of game they want to play, so
Mm.
I can then like go from there. So on the back burner, I have on my end, I've got ideas for different genres of games that I just sort of write down, different maps that I'm putting together just to have, so that when they say, "Oh, we want to try this," I can run with it, you know.
Mm. Right.
And I feel like, you know, I know I like, typically you'll find like nerds sort of specialize. Like there's Lord of the Rings nerds and there's Harry Potter nerds, and
Mm.
usually the two don't ever mix, you know.
Right.
You know, Star Trek and Star Wars, they're usually, but I'm like sort of this person that's in between. I love Star Trek, but I also love Star Wars. I have a lightsaber and I have a tricorder. Like
Yeah.
I'm okay with both, you know. I wouldn't mind playing a Lord of the Rings game, but I wouldn't mind running a Harry Potter type modern wizarding school game, you know.
Okay.
So in that vein, like I had a friend who, me and my wife knew this girl. She was really little when she was in the church, you know, grew up in our church, and I think she might have just turned like 22. So when she was like 18, 19, a couple of years back, during the pandemic. So she messages me on Instagram back when I had Instagram, and she goes, "Hey, so I didn't know that I would like Harry Potter, but my brother told me that I should read the books. So I read the first book and I watched the movie, and I know that you like do some like nerdy game stuff,
Yeah.
and I want to know, like, do you have a game that's like that?" And I said, "Give me a week and I'll find one." Because they said, "I'm pretty sure there is one." And I had just come across Kids on Brooms.
Mm. Yeah.
I love it because it's super rules light, super simple, and it leaves freedom for everybody to sort of work together. And I tried it out with two of my friends from my gaming group first, because I was like, my sister was the one who was into Harry Potter. I was always into Lord of the Rings. So I took time to like listen to the first audiobook of Harry
Sure.
Potter
Get
to get an idea
feel
of the
of it,
world.
right? The vibes and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
you know. And then I sat there and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I could totally make this." And then I was like, "All right, now." Then the other part of it is, one of my gaming friends was like, "Okay, but like, could you do that sort of from a Christian perspective?" And I
Mm.
was like, "There's a challenge. Like, how would I do that?" And I was like, "You know what?"
Okay. So
And I came,
what does that mean to you? Can you do that from a Christian perspective? Because but I want to hear what does that mean? So because it almost sounds like a form of nomism or legalism that says, can a Christian play one of these games or something? Is
Kind
that,
of, yeah.
or it's, I'm not understanding it correctly, and it's more like, can a Christian play one of these games and sneak in the message of salvation through the gospel or something like that? Is that like, how is that?
Something like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so more like the second one, not like the can.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's
Yeah.
like, is there a way to play this and also like sort of lean into the Christ saved us type of thing? Okay.
Exactly.
So what was
So,
what was your answer to that? Like, how did you tell me about that?
yeah. So my thoughts on it were like, okay, so I went through the audiobooks because my friend had asked me that question when I first started the first Harry Potter book. So now I'm like, all right, I'm hooked. I'm gonna go through all the books. That's it. I'm sitting here going through all the audiobooks. And I'm like, okay. I start thinking about it. I was like, okay, so technically Hogwarts is kind of like a Catholic boarding school. Like
Mm,
they're learning these ancient words of power, which when you're reading the Bible, you're learning Greek and Hebrew, all these ancient words of power also,
right, right.
and they're learning how to use them for, the benefit of the world around them and this, that, and the other. I was like, technically you could get away with making it kind of like a boarding school where you're learning, Christian history or something like that. So
Sure.
the idea that I had was trying to the only thing that like always bothered me with Harry Potter was the fact that like wizards look so different, like they look like they're
Mm,
still from the past.
right.
So I was like,
Wearing
okay,
robes and things. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, So and I said, but like when you look at like Catholic priests, they're usually wearing robes and
Mm,
the pontiff hats and
sure.
so I started doing some history work and I was like, okay, I've always loved Arthurian legend. I want to do some more research on that and how I can tie that in. And I had found this story of the first person who was given the title of Merlin,
Mm,
who like apparently the name Merlin is actually a title and not a name.
okay.
Um, and that person became this like world-renowned wizard, but the original story was he was a priest in a church, and that church sided with a group in a war that took place, and his side lost, and he was known as the healer of their group, and people would come to him, he would pray over them, and they would get healed.
Mm,
There was like this, like lots of obscure legend behind that, but then the story was that a lot of the like these old stories of wizards using wands came from priests who were given these rods of authority, and I'm like, that I can understand, where like you
mm,
see Catholic priests have these rods they use during ceremonial events, and I
mhm,
was like, okay, that I understand that, so instead of going the route of, oh, witchcraft and wizardry,
mm,
you have mages in the tradition of the magi who came to see Jesus,
mm,
and they, the tradition still lived on as these are the people who are sort of the watchers of history, where they look for certain signs in the heavens
mm,
and the signs in the earth to figure out what times are going to change. And like I started doing that, then it was like, all right, now what other sort of items can we throw in there? And I was like, okay. And it sounded crazy at first, but when I told one of my friends, he was like, all right, that sounds pretty awesome. Because I was like, how would I go about doing sort of the sorting hat situation?
mhm,
And the idea that I came up with was there's, a crystal, like a stone that looks almost like part crystal, part stone is brought out and, placed on an altar in front of you. And somebody walks up to it and it glows. And then you see wind start blowing around it in a certain direction, and the different houses were named after the cardinal, direction. So Tramontane and so forth. And the stone that was used is actually supposed to be one of the either the Urim or the Thummim from the old Israelites, where they would ask God,
mm,
a yes or no question, and he would
mhm,
give them either a negative or positive answer.
mhm,
So they have one of those stones, and it's like, well, when somebody can study it, and if one of the players decides they want to, well, what is it? Go and search what it is, and leave the player with trying to figure out what it is,
mm,
and so like a lot of it was trying to figure out what sort of things that we know as miraculous items from the Bible,
mhm,
and throwing it into story as something they can interact with. So
mm,
maybe there is a rod that there's like this sort of a tree branch that's standing up that looks like a walking stick, but there's fruit growing on it. That's the rod of Aaron that started growing the dates again. Like,
mm,
well, why does it grow fruit? Go find out for yourself. And leave
mm.
them to figure it out. So I started throwing stuff in there because
This is while you were
this
playing the Kids on Bikes game. Like you were
this is
playing,
the kids on brooms.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
this is
you,
like
sorry,
like while I
Kids
was
on Brooms.
developing the storyline. Yeah, yeah.
So you're playing Kids on Brooms, and the campaign setting essentially that you made was a Harry Potter type magical world setting, but there were objects of power in the world that had actual real historic roots of things. And so when the people interacted with them, if that object of power piques their interest to some degree, they as a player can go, well, what is this thing? And then you can say you do some research and study and you find out that it is this thing. And so it's not necessarily that you're pushing the idea of forgiveness of sins through faith in Jesus Christ. It's more so you're building a magical world where the lore is our lore, and kind of getting them to go, well, what is that? And then you go, oh, there's this book, the Bible. It's like,
exactly.
Okay, that's
you know.
I mean, I think that's an interesting resource because there's a lot of cool stories in the Bible that are like, what in the heck happened? Why are these bears eating these kids? Right? Like
exactly.
Because they made fun of a bald guy. Are you serious? Like, okay, no, there's interest. There's all sorts of. I think that's an interesting approach to touch that with, because the objects of power are interesting, and we innately find them interesting, and storylines that focus on objects of power or the power in objects are like, well, we're vexed by that, right? Like, we're totally vexed by right now it's UFOs. It's like
exactly.
Oh, UFOs.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in the 90s it was like X-Files and stuff like what is this pen that does a thing? Okay, so So you planted those objects of power, actual biblical artifacts, into the Kids on Brooms game system. Tell me more.
So with I found that it was really easy to then translate sort of things that the way I believe about with my personal religious beliefs, how I can sort of put it into the story and let everybody else unpack it as they go along. Like, it was really, again, I like to leave a lot of stuff up to the players to figure out. Excuse me. It lets them want to do more. It leaves a lot of things that aren't what's the word? They're not railroaded into the storyline. Like, these are things just in the periphery. Could it help in the game? Sure. Could it help in the storyline? Yeah. Do you have to get it? No. It's something that's there that for me, I think is pretty cool to throw in there. And then the challenge on me was, then I was like, all right, so if I was going to do this, how do I have this happen in New York City? And that's where I had this whole world build that I sat with, and I've got tons of drawings, tons of ideas that I have to at some point when I can get the game going again, run that game. But so I've
this
got
was
this
back
whole
in 2020 that you're running this game, or 2021.
This was 2022, I think.
Okay, right.
Yeah, right around there.
Okay.
So that was how I did that, and then it was like, all right, well, now, I mean, the thing is, even back when I was helping my friend develop his game, one of the games that we played, he was like, I want to run a superhero themed game. What do you guys want to, what do you guys think? And a bunch of us were like, sure, let's go for it. And that led me to thinking again, this, just because for me, I feel like the issue that I've always had is that the church as a whole, they do what I've heard and what I agree with is condemnation without investigation. This is bad, but they don't tell you why it's bad. Oh, this is evil, but why is it evil? So everybody knows the satanic panic happens, and everything is dubbed as evil, and especially in legalistic churches, everything is evil. Everything is bad. So
right. I
know
what you're talking about with that. I was at a church for a while that said Christians can't dance. And so obviously, if Christians can't dance, they certainly can't play Dungeons and Dragons. But it was the reason I left the church, because I didn't know what to do with that thing that's wide and branching. And okay, if you really go into it, sure, fine. Let's say that's true. Let's say the Christian cannot and should not, because it's a moral obligation. Well, that means a Christian can't watch dancing. Because that'd be like watching a real sin. It's not like watching a heist movie. Those people aren't really stealing. In a dancing scene, there are actually humans touching each other dancing. So if it's a sin to dance, it's a sin to watch dancing. means a Christian
Yeah,
can't watch I Love Lucy. That's bonkers to me. I don't know what to do with that. Like, so
exactly, exactly.
I know what you mean, though. There are churches that go hard in on that type of thing, and I've come to understand that is called nomism, where you're essentially making the salvation have a system of works associated with it, and it's definitely something you have to earn by your good behavior. Christ's blood is
Yeah,
not enough to atone for your sins unless you do these, things. So
exactly.
go ahead, keep going.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
interacting with you. It sounds like you were interacting with people who were kind of pushing back on you and saying, "How can you do this with kids or something?" Is that like behind the scenes somewhere in there?
There was a little bit of stuff because it was more when my friend was developing his game. He wanted to just do like a straight out full fantasy game, but he was in an Assemblies of God church where like D&D is still the devil. In
Really?
certain Assemblies
Okay.
of God churches, like
Mm.
he was like he had mentioned to somebody, and somebody was like, if you could do that but remove all the magic, go ahead and run the game.
Mm.
So he went Conan the Barbarian, where it's
Okay.
like there might be some mystical stuff, but you don't know what it is.
Mm.
But there's like outright no magic in the system, and that was
Mm.
like the first game that I played in was that type of setting.
Mm-hmm.
But then he was like, all right, so magic is not allowed, but superheroes are allowed. So he was like,
Right. That's where it's like,
you know,
okay, all right.
yeah,
But
you know,
how does
so
Scarlet Witch get her
we
powers? Can we do Scarlet? No, Scarlet Witch is a witch. So okay. Yeah.
exactly, you
Okay.
know. So we ended up doing a superhero game, and as we're building characters, I was like, all right, I want to push the limit on this system. I said I want my character to have we based our power systems off of Heroes Unlimited. So Heroes Unlimited has a really good way of breaking down powers into major powers and minor powers. Um, Major powers being like you are the embodiment of like this element,
Mm.
whereas minor powers affect only you.
Okay.
So Spider-Man technically is made up of a ton of minor powers, while like Superman has like a ton of minor powers also, but also like a major power.
Mm.
Where Magneto is magnetism, the
Mm.
force. He is the magnetism force.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, I want my character to be immortal.
What's the system called again?
And
Superheroes United?
Heroes Unlimited. It's
Heroes
a
Unlimited. Okay.
Palladium superhero game.
Okay. Okay.
The game itself is extremely complex when you're playing it raw.
Yeah.
But I love their descriptions of superpowers. So like if I were even running another game, I would use that book and say, read that description. It makes more sense.
Okay.
you know. Um, but yeah, so I was like, I want my character to be immortal. And he goes, all right, well, how he was like, all right, if I were trying to pitch this towards, the gaming group that I run at the church, how would you sort of pitch that to somebody who thinks that magic is evil? I said, oh, it's not magical.
Mm.
I said, my character was, originally born in ancient Egypt, but God chose him to be a witness to the things that are happening in the different ages. So it's not that I can't die. I can die. It's an extremely difficult process.
Mm.
But my character has been around to watch the ages of history to testify at the end of what happened since the beginning. And he was like, that's a very good way to and like,
Mm.
and mention what I was mentioning before. The hard part is, like I said, we like Christians certain Christians like to say, oh, this is good, this is bad, without giving a reason why. But then there's also no alternatives, and that's been the thing that my dad has been a very big proponent of when I was growing up. He was like, okay, well, the pastors always make this quote of how, oh, we lose, like 89% of our youth when they go to college. And my argument for that has always been, well, what alternatives have you given them?
Mm.
You tell them, oh, you can't play video games. Video
Right.
games is the devil. They go to
Right.
school and their friends are passing with better grades than they are, and they play video games. What alternative have you given them to the video games?
Mm.
Oh, well, martial arts is evil. Okay, well, I know in the Bronx, people have tried to mug me multiple times, and if not for me knowing how to defend myself, I would have been, very severely hurt.
Sure.
So what alternative have you given? And then they don't want to have that. They don't want to have that conversation because they don't have the answer. Essentially, usually.
Right.
And with a lot of the gaming groups that I've seen that have started in youth groups, those groups tend to be a lot more tight knit and they're very close to each other. So when they have somebody when somebody's like, oh man, I'm going through a rough time, can I talk with you? They're okay and comfortable talking with somebody about their struggles, about their issues, about what they're,
Mm.
what they're going through mentally or
Sure.
spiritually.
Because
They
they've
feel more
gamed
comfortable with that.
together and they've experienced conversations, even though
Hmm.
those conversations are focused elsewhere, they've had time to talk and learn a little bit about each other and maybe a moment to save one another from a monster or something. Those are tethering experiences, even though they're, fantasy or pretend, they're still tethering experiences.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
and like like I said, it's always the case. How do we give them alternative? Because if we leave, you know, I'm a student at Christian Leaders Institute, and one of the classes I had to take was a creative writing course, and the the final project I had to write an essay about if you were asked to write something, for the Christian community, what would you write and why?
Hmm.
And my response to it was, I said I would write Christian fiction because there's not enough of it. Like that's essentially what it is. Like growing up, you can go to a music store and find that there's sort of the Christian music section
Right.
and find gospel, contemporary, Christian rock, Christian heavy metal, and like there's different genres,
Sure.
tons of music. But when it comes to books, Frank Peretti wrote a really good series, two books, This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness.
Hmm.
Ted Decker, phenomenal writer also. We know we have, J.R.R. Tolkien's work.
C.S.
We
Lewis,
have
right?
C.S. Lewis,
Sure.
which even in the 90s, like there were Christians who were like, oh, we have to pray for C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien because they're writing, works of evil. And it's like, did you guys even know anything about these? Like, just any of C.S. Lewis's other writing, But, apart from those, there's no, any fiction that is written is usually, like I've seen lots of retellings,
Hmm. Sure.
of the Bible story as a modern story or something like that. I've seen lots of stuff like that. I've seen, stuff that's based on somebody's personal situation and their walk and stuff like that. But I'm like, and what about the high fantasy stories? What about these, like, and as a kid growing up, I was like, okay, so I liked X-Men because I was the kid that didn't fit in, and the X-Men all didn't fit in anywhere. And in my head, being raised in a Christian household with a dad who was the assistant pastor of a church, I was like, okay, if according to X-Men, everything was all based on evolution, and these characters are based off of an accident in the genes, well, how much more would there be like Christian superheroes when they're given a purpose?
Hmm.
And there never was that, until I think it was 1993. We were at a pastor's conference, and our church used to have a bookstore. So we're at this pastor's conference, and Thomas Nelson Publishing Company was there, and they had a big poster that said "The Illuminator" coming next year.
Hmm.
And most people have never heard of him. He's the only official Marvel Christian superhero.
Okay.
He like got his powers through like this beam of light hitting him while he's walking around the woods on a snipe hunt at summer camp. And he doesn't really know how to use them until like this, like the guy seemed like a church janitor, but he also seemed like the pastor of the church in the story. Like it's very vague.
Mm-hmm.
And he like sort of gives him direction and tells him how to use his powers and the force for good that he should be. So then we see him after that with like this leather jacket that has a cross on it and a motorcycle helmet. Um, and he's like he can fly, he can create a light version of himself, he can blast energy out of his hands. And when we saw them there as a kid, I was like, oh, this is so exciting. And they were like, yeah, we're going to get like a whole, 15 issue run and this, that, and the other. It's a co-production with Thomas Nelson and Marvel. And then they got 3 issues and then it was canceled. So,
It was just, I'm
you
assuming
know,
it just wasn't popular enough.
yeah, they said it
Okay.
wasn't popular enough, that it didn't generate enough interest. And I'm like, we only got the 3 issues that you guys gave us initially
Right.
at, the conference, but there was never any question of, well, who would buy this? Like it was never, do you think you guys would be able to sell this? And
Right.
at the kids in my church, we would have all bought it because we all wanted to read more about these heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And it always bothered me. Like I said, don't have any superheroes, so parents in church will watch the whole Infinity series
Sure. Sure.
and like leave their kids to learn morals from the superheroes,
Mm.
and then wonder why their kids don't, come to them when they have issues. It's like, oh, well, I
Mm.
saw, this is what they did in the movie. So I was like, well, maybe that's the way I should do it. Instead of
Right.
thinking, all right, how do I, can I ask dad about this? Can I ask mom
Sure.
about that? Can I go talk to my youth leader about that?
Mm.
And I feel like if there were alternatives, more
Right.
alternatives,
The
I feel
issue
like,
has been that Christians largely have ceded the artistic grounds. You know, like in the 1960s and earlier, Hollywood was a place where conservatives were, you know, were making business decisions about art, right? And like the
yeah,
Hollywood production system was like these massive companies like MGM and whatever, and they were like, okay, let's like make a business decision about Cary Grant or whoever else and John Wayne. And then at some point, like I don't know where the switch happened, but it went from being that thing to a organization that is largely liberal, secular, leftist to the point now where it's like, I mean, it's like it's like watching a cult manifest itself. You know, like the
yeah,
ideology is so thick and it's laid into
yeah,
every single production. I don't know if I've seen a
mhm,
movie in the last 5 or 6 years that I'm like, yeah, that was a true piece of artwork, right? There was no, but
mhm,
but I know what you mean because like if you go to the tabletop
yeah,
RPG space, I have learned from my short time exploring tabletop RPGs and games that it is largely a political landscape. It says it's not political, and that is absolutely a
yeah,
lie. It is buried
yeah,
and laden. Like I could grab. I'm not going to do it, but I could grab
mhm,
like 5 or 6 books
yeah,
downstairs and flip through them and go, here's the ideological framework of the cult mindset that is laid into the book. And because
yeah,
of that, and it's again, it's not all of them. There are very many of these rules light systems that are not trying to embed the idea in. But I looked at one recently that I didn't even really fully understand what I was looking at, and it was how to build your character. But the character you're gonna build is a transgender character in their identity. Like they're a girl who believes they're a boy, and so the
yeah,
fantasy fiction that you're playing out is it's a propaganda, right? This is
yeah,
indoctrination propaganda that is built into a tabletop game, and like they do it under the guise of like inclusivity and diversity and equity and inclusion, and it's like, but whoa, hold on a
yeah,
second, but you're also bearing in this the message that if you're a kid struggling with your gender, with your sexuality, because all kids struggle with their sexuality, the answer is simply to pretend you're not that thing. Which, you know, you're right. Since Christians ceded this ground, we have video games where it's like it's one of two things right now. It's either a video game where they're blurring the lines of what a woman is by making the women look mannish and act mannish, and the way that they be a strong woman in the game is by punching through solid stone or something like that. Or you have this space that's going, well, we reject that strange art, so it's going to lean towards pornography, you know, and in order to make our women not be strange, masculine, you know, whatever they are, we're going to like have strange, you know, we're going to have jiggly body parts and whatever. It's like, so the video
yeah,
game space is just like, it's nothing.
yeah,
It's with two different types of weird ideologies that are bickering
yeah,
with each other. And Christians have kind of gone, you guys figure it out, right? You know, I don't know.
yeah,
I guess Christians, do you want to play Baldur's Gate and Diablo
mhm,
4 for your action adventures? Figure it out, you know, like you
yeah,
know, you're right. There's in both the gaming space, the video gaming space, the movie space, and where they've tried to start taking ground back is I don't want to say it's all left behind type of, you know, Kirk Cameron. I don't want to say it's all
yeah,
that, but there is a lean towards that where it loses the subtlety and the nuance that you described with like those objects of power. It starts to get a little
mhm,
ham-fisted, and the thing is, like, people watch it and they go, I can suss this out. You guys are trying to program me with Christian stuff, as opposed to just making Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings
yeah,
is clearly a Christian story, and anyone who says otherwise is coping really hard. You know, I mean, like it is a
yeah,
story about the power or the evil in power, right? And
yeah,
like that power corrupts and stuff. And that's the thing. It
yeah,
doesn't necessarily lead you to Jesus Christ on the cross, but it's going to get you asking questions about what is good and what is evil.
yeah,
And Aslan is that thing too. Like C.S. Lewis is being a little heavy-handed,
yeah,
but C.S. Lewis other works, the Ransom series is a series that is basically structured in a real Christian world with real Christian values, where there are forces of darkness trying to plague humanity, and there are forces of light that he calls like El Dile and the I forget all the terms. It's been a while since I heard it, but it's basically there's
Yeah.
a world building there, and the world building, when you're done with it, if you like the science fiction aspect of it, you go, I want to know a little more about that, you know,
Yeah.
and maybe I'll lean into, okay, what is this other book he's written, right? But since
Yeah.
Christians go, art is evil, you know, no one.
Exactly.
If you look at Conan, you're a pervert or something. It's like,
Yeah.
that's a hard line, because that means
Yeah.
that you're telling Christians, here's your goal. You wake up, you pray, you read your Bible, you believe Jesus Christ died for your sins, and you go to bed. That's your life as a Christian. Don't interact with anyone in the world. Don't have any water cooler moments. You know, like
Yeah.
be out of the world and not in it is the message. I've rambled on for a while. Let me hear
No,
let me hear your thoughts.
It's also the fact that, like, how do you, because my family has always been very big on evangelism. My dad was, into street outreach, and we've done missions trips to Guatemala. In fact, the first time I ran a game for some of the guys in my church, we were on a missions trip to Guatemala, and I was writing, trying to figure out how to play an X-Files game with my friends back home. And then one of the guys there was like, he sees me with my, like, I was using World of Darkness as the base, the system.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at me and goes, so what's that book you got there? And I go, like, I had my book, and I go like this. I go, nothing. he goes, because it kind of looks like a gaming book. And I said, well, that depends. Are you interested in gaming? And he goes, definitely. So I said, okay, well, let's write you up a character. So I said, well, we're going under the understanding that I don't know this system yet. I'm still learning it. So he was like, well, what kind of game is it? I said, well, all right, I'm going to be honest. I'm trying to run specifically an X-Files game. And he goes, give me that pen and paper. And we got him writing his character right away. So we're on a mission trip, rolling dice at the dinner table, and playing X-Files. So
was the World of Darkness system you were using the Vampire the Masquerade or the Mage Ascension? What was that?
No, it was literally just the World of Darkness. Like, I think it was the second edition, because it was like
so there was like
there was
like a generic book for. Okay, I didn't understand that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a generic world book, and pretty much you can play the game as like paranormal investigators, which is how I first played the game. So I was like, okay, I think it lends itself pretty well to playing X-Files. So
sure.
I tried that out for a bit, which led to like hilarious moments. Like, we're in the church sitting there rolling dice, and one of the guys was like, all right, I want to hack this government database, and he used every point of like inspiration that he could. He rolled like 25 dice, rolled them out on the floor, and they all rolled fails. And like, we were sitting there just dying laughing at him. he's like, roll, and then we're just sitting there dying laughing as everything just falls apart.
Right.
But like, we had great times with that.
Yeah.
And for us, a lot of us still keep in contact with each other, even though everybody sort of moved away from New York and stuff like that. Like, everybody's gone on with their lives and has families and stuff. But for us, it was a very good way for us to come together. And like I said, whenever any of us went through anything, we called each other. We're like, hey, listen, I need some advice. Hey, I need some help with something. Hey, can you pray for me with this? And that's where I'm like, churches are missing out on how do you reach those people that normally they're not, like, whether they've had a situation at church where like it was a negative response and they don't want to go back, but they're in this gaming community. And that's where, like, I had last year somebody had told me about, I don't know if you ever heard of Lux Digital Church.
No. Oh,
so,
wait. Is maybe, but you go tell me it like I guess maybe I don't know about it, but I think I may have heard about that. But go ahead.
Okay, so the pastor at Lux, he got into gaming. He was doing like a Twitch channel because he wanted to see somebody else playing Elden Ring, and they didn't have that option. So he was like, all right, so I'm going to do this on Twitch. And he started playing and talking about it. And other, content creators in the area said, hey, can I partner with you? And he said that the moment that they came over and we're going to stream together, he said, hey, can I pray for you? And they said, sure. And then like after stream was done, they were like, nobody's ever asked me, can I pray with you or pray for you? Like, why do you do that? And it led to an evangelizing moment, which led to him sort of walking down this path of where, like, we have tons of content creators on Twitch and on YouTube that they don't want to go to a church building. They have sort of a concept of what the church is. They don't feel they fit that concept.
Right.
And, he was like, he spoke with his leaders at his church, and he said, I want to do this digital church thing and try and reach some people that are technically unreachable because most Christians won't go out to them.
Mm.
You know, you're not going to find a typical street outreach person at a Gen Con. You know, like it's just it's something that if they're considering this is bad, they're not going to go there. You know, so how do you reach that person?
Right.
You know,
and the same would be for like the hobby stores or other.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. You know, so that like it started off that way, and they're like they were very great for me spiritually at a time when I was like, you know, COVID happened. I was disconnected from church for a little while, and I just needed to be reconnected. You know, and just, you know, feel connected to a group. And the pastor there was a great guy, Pastor Mark. You know, so they do their services Wednesdays on Twitch. They're really good. And it's a good way to like reach, you know, them and the people that normally don't want to go to a church building, you know. But they also partner with Love Thy Nerd.
Okay.
And Love Thy Nerd, their whole thing is like doing missions trips to conventions. Like they go to gaming conventions with Love Thy Nerd shirts on. They'll run games, they'll play games, and just be that Christian that's there, you know, which sometimes that's all you need is to be around the person who's like, yeah, I'm a Christian and I'm okay with gaming with you. Like, you know, to realize that, yeah, not all of us are, you know, ridiculous. Like you can just have a good time and ask your questions when you're ready, you know? And I feel like that's something that over time, the church has lost the ability to just sit and talk with people, you know, because they just want to be able to say, these are the laws and either you follow them or you go to hell, you know? And it's like, well, there's a little more to that, you know, and I feel like I
struggled with that a lot as a new Christian. It was about 2021 that my family started going to church, you know, and I was a Christian when I was a kid, but I'd fallen away for about like 30 years. And when I first started in with it, there was a desire to, you know, find the right one, you know, like, so we started with it at a church, but I want to be at the right one, right? Like maybe this is the wrong church. And so that traveling around thing happened. And some of the struggle was like, when you first become a Christian, there's a desire to find the edges of things. And sometimes you do it by leaning into legalism and nomism, like going like, this is all wrong and this is all bad. And so we went through that. Like, I was just like, we can't watch these Marvel movies. These are sins. Like, we can't play this card game. This is a sin. And I did that with a bunch of stuff. But then at the same time was like, wow, I'm not really connecting with my family at all. Like we're not playing video games. We're not doing whatever. And then I started trying to connect with these Camp Agape kids and made a relationship with one outside of the camp where we're, you know, getting burgers and hanging out. But the only thing I had was Fortnite, right? I just didn't know how to connect with this kid otherwise. You know, I'm going like, we're going to play this card game or we're going to play this whatever. And it was just kind of like shut down. The moment we turned on Fortnite and we're shooting bad guys together and trying to go for that victory royale, we had something to talk about. Like it wasn't always good, but it was something. And there was a point where I was trying to figure out Dungeons and Dragons. Like, can a Christian play Dungeons and Dragons? Here I'm buying books. I'm trying to play with my family, but I'm struggling to go through the pages with the demons on them. You know, like a person who's afraid of spiders, like it's going to crawl off the page on me or something. And I saw this discussion by this YouTube channel, Cross Examined. And this guy is talking about like magic cards and whatever, but I was like, it's close enough to what I'm curious about. So let me hear what he has to say. And he made this really compelling argument. He's like, so when it rains, can I pray that everyone becomes baptized? And I was like, whoa, that's bonkers. That's right. It's a choice, right? Like, no, you're right. You can't do that. He's like, so let's everyone go swimming at the pool. And I just sit there and go, you're all baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. And then they're like, guys, like, no, that's not going to work. And he's like, right, because it's a choice, right? You have to choose to go into this thing with a certain spirit. You have to. Oh, and he's like, could a Christian use a Ouija board? He's like, yeah, I can use a Ouija board. But the moment I say I want to try and talk to the thing on the other side, ooh, be careful, right? So you might not be able to use a Ouija board because it doesn't have a lot of other functions. And the same thing with like tarot cards or whatever. But just because it's adjacent to a gaming hobby, it doesn't mean you can't play the Arkham horror game and a character uses a tarot card. We can go, that person's probably a Satan worshiper or whatever. Like we can make our judgment about them, but we don't have to be in fear of it. And that example of being baptized in the rain was like the thing that broke I was like, right, it's a choice that I make. I go into this thing with the desire to interact with some kind of spirit. And if I'm indwelt
Yeah.
by the Spirit of God, one, I'm promised that God's not going to leave me, right? I'm promised that that thing is going to be with me, and even though I fail, He's going to He's going to sanctify and protect me, and that is going to be a downhill, uphill, downhill, uphill, downhill, uphill struggle forever. But I don't know. It was something that was really helpful for me and that I needed to hear, because I was falling hard into that legalism thing, which is what brought us to the church that said you can't dance. And that was like, oh, there's a bridge too far. Like, I don't know what to do with this. Like,
Yeah.
but I'm sorry. Go ahead. I interrupted you again.
Yeah, no, like I definitely get it, because like I said, I feel like there's always like there's this and there's no alternative. Like there's never the opportunity to say, okay, so what can we replace it with? And I think I had recently come across oh my gosh, what's the name of it? It's like Gaming in the Bible 5e or something like that. I have to send you the link afterwards. It's a
Yeah.
PDF on Drive Through RPG, but it's literally being able to play a D&D game in the Bible times and stuff like that. And you can like kind of like, all right, it's pretty cool. Like you could do that, and that's a good way to like get kids to sort of conceptualize, or even get adults to sort of conceptualize things that the apostles were going through, and like stuff like that. But there's also the fact that, like we said, Tolkien definitely hid, and even if he didn't realize it, he hid so much of the faith in Lord of the Rings, in his world building,
Right.
that you can draw parallels and use that as a what's it called, like a almost like a devotional, and like be able to like read a chapter of the book and have like a specific location in the Bible that talks about stuff like this going on, even just talking about fellowshipping together and what being in a fellowship means, like there's so much you can draw from that material, and one of the things that my dad was a youth pastor when I was in high school. So like I was like from 16 to 18, my dad was a youth pastor at our old church. And excuse me. So we always had everybody over the house all the time. And my dad likes video games, and a lot of the guys like playing sports games. So they'd play, football or basketball. But then we would also do like Tekken tournaments, so we're there playing fighting games, beating the heck out of each other. But it always led to conversations happening, whatever game we were playing, so we'd be sitting there talking, and somebody's just talking about what's going on in their life, because when you're playing the game, you feel comfortable just talking, like you were saying, you can connect with people. And I don't think a lot of people realize how easy you can connect with somebody when you have that second where they feel like this is a common interest. And because we have a common interest, I feel like they can relate to me if I tell them this, like that barrier is broken down, where it's like, oh, well, I'm talking to a random adult, where now it's like, oh, I'm talking to somebody.
You make miniatures too? Like, oh, I make miniatures.
Exactly.
I like how you paint it, right? It breaks the can we even discuss things with each other, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it led to a lot of times where like my dad would pause the game and then sit there and like go through this whole like theological survey on this topic because somebody broached the discussion. And everybody's like, whoa, that actually makes a lot of sense. And then we'd sit like 5 seconds for a couple of, just to let it settle in. And then somebody would talk smack again, and we're back to playing the game. Like it would happen. But everybody remembered those moments where we were like, oh, I remember we were playing, NFL Fever, and we talked about this. They're like, yeah, I remember, that was really good. That was really good. Like it lends itself to having those conversations. Like, and that's why, like, I found your YouTube channel because it popped up on my feed when you were saying, addressing Christian parents, and I was like, this is genius, and I wish that other Christians would say it, so it's just one of those things that I know for me, it's like there needs to be the alternative space, the way to reach that kid who isn't going to play basketball, because a lot of youth groups, they do sports, and that works for a lot of kids. But what do you do with the kid who just wants to sit on the sideline that is reading a book, or one of those kids that would rather be painting or drawing? Like, how do you reach that kid? The kid who barely comes out of his room, how do you reach that kid? Because the parents can barely get them out of their room. So how do you reach that kid? And that's where I'm like, there needs to be more alternatives, for Christians to not sort of shove it into people's face, but to know, yeah, we play D&D, and we have a Bible study after, like I don't know what else to tell you about,
right. It's it's a forefront of interaction, especially now because this Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPG thing is, I don't want to call it like a booming industry, but it's a blossoming. Like it is actually,
Yeah.
you know, I think in the 80s and 90s it was kind of in its infancy, and there was an aspect of it where it's like it was at the fringe of culture, like the Star Trek and the various fantasy things. But at this point, it's, you know, like you mentioned, the Stranger Things, and then there's like Dungeons and Dragons movies, and then there's all these, you know, YouTube streamers. When you start talking about Dungeons and Dragons and different tabletop RPGs, it is a very strange type of storytelling. Like it's more like a video game than it is like a movie. And even there, the similarity is different because the video game has a bounded world, and this is potentially a boundless world. So it's a great way to connect to someone. And as I've been like learning about tabletop RPGs, because if you look through my channel, you'll notice like I started out, I was just like, I'm gonna do wargaming, right? My son and I like wargaming. We're gonna do Marvel Crisis Protocol or whatever wargame. And we, at the same time, we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, right? And like we weren't playing good, and our sessions were going bad. And some of it was because of fifth edition, and some of it was because I was a new DM. And as I'm going through this D&D thing, I was having these questions, these issues, like, is this okay for me as a Christian to do? And I keep seeing people like answering the question like, oh yeah, you can't do that. Like that's, oh no. And I was like, I let's say I believe you, right? A Christian can't do this, and maybe that's right. I don't know what to do with the fact that we've been getting together every Saturday night, you know, and we're hanging out, we're praying for popcorn, you know, we're talking with each other. Like, I mean, we haven't summoned a demon once, you know, I mean, like, you know, and I mean, we're not, that's also not even close to the focus. Like, this is one of the things I asked on my YouTube channel, because I like asking people who played the game a long time questions, and I got a response that was interesting. And it was like, the point of this game from a Dungeon Master perspective is to ask players hard questions. And it triggered that thing in my mind where I was like, that's what was so cool about the Next Generation. It has this episode where Commander Riker goes down to the planet, meets this androgynous character, you know, that feels more like a she than a nothing. And, you know, it's like at the end of it, there's this question raised, which is like, what's an individual? Like, what is an individual who's outside of their society? If someone's outside of their society, do we force them to conform? Like, it doesn't answer that question. It's a question where you as the viewer are going like, man, not going there with guns blasting, right? Or you're going, no, she should do that. But no one gets the answer. And now that all the television and movies are essentially forms of propaganda, my thought as a parent, as a person who interacts with kids, you know, and someone who maybe sees it as like the mission field, the way you've been doing this with Boys and Girls Clubs, I'm like, this is absolutely the way that you get to youth and say, I don't know, what do you do when that wizard says, I'm going to let you go, but not the rest of the 10 prisoners? And you know, as a character, you're getting out scot-free, but you're leaving them to some kind of doom. But you also know he's stronger than you. Do you die in that room? Does your character die in that room? Do you figure out how to get out? But here's a Kobayashi Maru for you to deal with, and it's a moral quandary too. It's not just the Klingons are shooting your thing. It's the Klingons are. I'm actually just remembered the Kobayashi Maru. The Klingons are attacking this vessel. You can fly away scot-free, you know. And it's like, but if you don't fly away scot-free, you're probably dead, you know. And like that's a, you know, I just played that session last night with my friend. Like he set up one of these situations, and I'm like, I'm going down dead, you know. Like I killed the character, and it was like, but it's, I think as I've looked into the tabletop RPGs more and more, I get the sense of what you're saying, that this is the front, and you illustrated it very well. The avenue in is character. I've approached it wrong a lot of this time. I've gone with like mechanics and board game and whatever, but it's character. And I think I've started getting the pieces of that a couple weeks ago where I'm like, oh, okay. But I think you highlighted it very well, especially with kids. Give them a character and allow them to fill the space of that character with ideas and story and wants and needs, and allow it to be adjacent to them or allow it to be worlds away.
but lay into
Yeah.
that character idea and then bring that character into conflict or something.
Yeah.
Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. The the other thing that I feel is allowing them to figure out their character's story arc. You know, because like I think a lot of the times the problem that I have is a lot of especially with Christian movies, I watch them and I feel like they're not real enough. Like I don't connect with them. You know,
Right,
like
right.
the examples that I've seen, I'm like, it's not a bad movie. It's just that I don't see any reflection of real life for me. You know, like I've experienced more hate and anger from Christian people than I have from people who were not Christian. You know, which is hard to then say when you put that in a movie. It's like, oh, we're only getting hate from outside.
Right.
I've seen it the other way around. You know, but then you also have typically there's like this random situation that happens and the character is redeemed, but it's like really short and fast. But there's never been I haven't really seen anything that's like there's a full-on redemption story where somebody starts off very much like Les Miserables. You've got Jean Valjean has hit the bottom of the bottom, low of the low, and then has worked his way back up trying to redeem himself, not realizing that God's already redeemed him. And the whole story is he's not realizing that he's already been redeemed. He doesn't have to keep doing works to redeem himself. And that's why I love that musical and the story, because it's just that story arc. You never see that anymore. So I'm like, how come there are no, stories written by Christians where it's like I have time where the character has gone through a full story arc? The character used to be into XYZ situation and they're trying to get out of it and showing that they can go from being this person to now being what God saw them at the end. Preachers preach about it in church, but they never allow people to realize that there is an arc that you as the character in your story is going to go through. And I feel like that's something that I also like to focus on with the characters, whether it's adults or children, is letting them know your character. Typically, I don't like running games where like the person's like, oh, I'm going to play evil alignment. But I don't mind the players being like, yeah, my character's in a dark place right now because of XYZ situation. Okay, let's work through that with your character. Like what led your character out of the situation. And for me, the reason I do that is because when I was a teenager, my parents went through a really messy divorce. And it led me down to a really bad depressive place where I got into drinking. And knowing how bad off I was, knowing how much worse I could get, I went to my friend's youth pastor because my dad was the youth pastor at the time. And I told him, I always credit him with this. I said, Pastor Sam, listen to me. I need to talk to you. I'm going through something. I can't talk to my youth pastor because my youth pastor is my dad. And I don't need him knowing that I'm pissed off at him right now. And I need someone that's going to listen to me and not tell my parents, And he said, okay, do you like tacos? And I said, Sam, I'm pouring my soul out to you, and you're like talking about food. What's wrong with you? And he goes, well, there's Taco Tuesdays. Do you wanna go have some tacos? And then Taco Tuesday became our thing, where we just meet up, get lunch. I would talk. He would walk me through the situation, and he counseled me for like a year. And it's something that affected my life because I was able to go through my dark time and go from that to going up. And it wasn't a complete straight line. Like it wasn't like, oh, and then God saved me, and oh. It took time. It took time to walk through, and I'm okay with players saying my character is in a dark place. They're not completely evil, but they are questioning things. Okay, let's walk them through it. And letting their character actually have a redemption arc, because that's typically where the work can be seen in your life. Where like, I was this person, I'm not this person anymore. And I feel like there's not enough of that in Christian literature and Christian movies. Like it's not represented enough, at least in a real way for me. And I feel like that's where in the gaming spaces we can allow people to, kids who have questions, they're going to ask them. Where can they ask them? They if you tell them, oh, this is evil, but they want to ask about it, they can't go to somebody in the church. So where are they going to get their answers at? They're going to get it from somebody else. So how can we give them a space to say, all right, so what's your question? And that's where I feel like gaming can definitely help with teaching redemption, and also, like you said, putting them into these moral situations where they're like, oh, you know what, I've got to think about this. In fact, I was going to say there's this, I don't know if you in 2012 there was a I think it was a minister of international development in Norway.
Okay.
um, he was he got he had vote they voted him in, whatever, and then people asked him in an interview, um, you have no experience in this, so how did you what really makes you think you can do this? And he goes, well, I'm a gamer. I play D&D,
Hmm.
and in my D&D sessions, I've negotiated with kings, I have negotiated with terrorists, I've negotiated with slave traders, and if I can do that, what else can what's going to stop me?
Hmm.
You know, and it's like, you know, if somebody who not using it for a tool like that can do that, how much more can we use it when we're like, all right, putting our kids there, or other people into these situations? All right, how do you figure it out from your perspective? What do you think is the best course of action? And letting them really work through it. You know,
Right.
I think it's a great tool for that. You know.
You've highlighted something when you mentioned the divorce you were going through. My mind immediately went to my nephew. My sister and brother-in-law are going through a divorce right now, and it's left my nephew in a very disparate and distant place. Like, interacting with him has been tumultuous, difficult. And as you were talking about it, like, each time through this conversation we've talked, my mind goes back to him and different attempts that I've had to try and game with him to connect. We had like one semi-good session, like, where I got him to get off of Roblox and try and play Mouse Ritter, not Mouse Guard. It's like the rules light, no story version of it, but and I just got him to like kind of try and do some things, right? And he was into it, but then the last time we tried to interact, it was just like it was shut down. The divorce has been affecting him negatively, but one of the thoughts I had while you were mentioning that was that you've kind of given me a sense of an inroad to him again, and it is like allowing him to voice out the frustration and the struggle that he's been, essentially to create some sort of Taco Tuesday with him, in the form of a game session or something. That's an interesting sort of side effect of the conversation that we had today. I mean, obviously, I'm talking with you and trying to pull wisdom out of you because you've been doing a thing that I'm like, I recognize we need to do. And us as humans, Americans, parents, Christians, non-believers, whatever, we're struggling with our kids right now, period. Like, we are struggling with our kids. And I would say I have a pretty good relationship with my son, to where we have very good, direct, discerning conversations, and I'm still struggling with him. And I have plenty of time in the week to spend with him. He is not a kid who is like lacking attention or access to his parents. Compile him with some actual real life tragedies, and I'm like, oh, I can't even imagine what other parents are going through. But I still, even with that, I see this as the inroad. Like, I see it as the inroad more than I see video games. And I was a video gamer. Like, I'm 30 years of video games. I have gone from video games to, convert of tabletop RPGs, even more so than board games, because the board game comes out, and then when we're done with our session, Clue's over. Kids aren't really thinking about, what did Mr. Mustard do? But you get them in one of these games. Like, I am still thinking about the game my character died in last night and going, yeah, I still shoot that wizard. What I mean? He says the prisoners get to go, or I said the prisoners are going back to their cells, but I get to go free. I'm still shooting him, man. And then I'm rethinking that thing in my mind. The fact my character died is even more infuriating, but at the same time, I'm like, I still do it. What I mean? Like,
We'll do it, every time.
And the other thought I had while you were talking was, would you be interested in looking at a few game systems I've seen that are being developed by Christian people? Because I've noticed some ideas in their game systems, and I don't have a very good experience, or I don't have a lot of experience. I don't have 20 years of looking at game systems as experience. I've been looking at these things almost from the framework of someone who looks at it like video games. And as I'm looking at it, I go, I understand this mechanic related to this mechanic related to this thing, but I don't always go character. I kind of stay mechanics oriented, and then I see how this lore has tethered this character path in the world. Interesting, right? But I got the thought that you actually might be helpful to some of the people, because let me parse this out because I'm jumping around right now. There are people in my Discord community who are making tabletop RPGs. and they are Christian or Orthodox or Catholic or something, and they're at various different stages of developing their game. But oftentimes they're looking for outside thoughts and opinions and ideas, and on occasion I get to be one of those outside sources of thoughts and opinions. And other times it's other people who have a very specific niche that they're niche of connectivity or understanding or experience they're looking for. If you'd be interested, there's several individuals I will just probably put you in contact with, and they might appreciate your insight and ideas looking at it from game design, because I believe that a few of them are actually aiming their games in the direction of the people you've been playing games with, 15-year-olds, 15 to 40, whatever, like, or maybe even younger, 8 to 40, like that kind of thing. So is that something you'd be interested in looking into?
Yeah. I mean, like, I have no problem, looking stuff over,
Okay.
It's just something I do.
Sure.
So
I've seen some interesting
no problem.
things in the so like one of the issues I really disliked Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and there are many reasons I don't like it, but one of the reasons was the incoherency of the lore. The lore feels like something that's like sometimes you'd watch a TV show like 24, and by the time you get to the last episode, you go, I wonder if they wrote this whole thing before they started filming it. Like I get the sense that episode 24 knew what episode 20 or 22 was, and like it wasn't made up as you. But then you watch a show like Lost, and you go, did these people write this thing as they were filming it? Like, and you go, yeah, dang it, they did. And so one of the things that I felt about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition was it felt like a story that was written as some. No one really structured it out well, because you have this world where there's 1,000-year-old elves who are worshiping gods that 500 years ago were stripped of their powers and could be beaten in a bar brawl. And I'm like, so are these people really dumb, or or they only have like a 2-week memory? I don't understand why anyone would worship this god Odin and then there was just all sorts of things like that that felt really dumb lore-wise. Some of the things I've noticed from the Christians who are designing games is they build lore in interesting ways. They're not necessarily building a world where Christ has died for our sins and there was a cross or whatever. It's adjacent. It's another parallel universe, but it still has a structure to the world building. Where if you play as a character who's like a warlock, for example, that's a doomed character from the start. That is a character who's made a pact with a demon, and they are on a road to hell, and that's a character progression. And me as a Christian and as a gamer go, that's a darned interesting character to play. It's not a character I want to be. It's not someone I want to live in life, but I would be interested in playing that doomed warlock who's trying to use these gifts of the demons for good, but knows I'm making a choice every time I do it, and my soul is being damned to something. Like that's and I haven't seen that in Dungeons and Dragons, and I haven't seen that in a lot of these, kind of secular systems, but I think it's interesting to see what Christians are making in this space, because they're making stuff that I go, that's what's missing from the stories. That's what's missing from Rey Skywalker, right? Rey Skywalker has none of the suffering and the failure and like the hand being chopped off and the, hey, your dad is actually the bad guy. Oh, okay, she does now, but whatever. It's like, it doesn't, not the real way. It has the, I don't know. It's all, to me, it's all Mary Sue, and there's just a lot of that. Whether you're a boy or a girl in the story, it's like if you're being successful, it's not because you had to work or struggle. So anyways, I went off on a rant again. Thank you for being patient with my rants. I tend to do this, but
no worries. I get it.
What are your thoughts about, like, as you were talking, I got the sense that you might do a really good job of building settings and worlds. Have you ever thought about designing, maybe not designing your whole system, but have you ever thought about designing a campaign for kids on brooms or something?
Like I've got tons of notes that are just sitting there.
Dude, what are you doing?
I've got tons of notes.
Like publish them. Like there are people who are looking for that type of stuff, and maybe they're looking for it for their 5th edition game or their Shadow Dark game. What do you think about that?
it's really just been, like I said, the last 5 years being a stay-at-home dad. There's been like I've had my phone. I was like, oh, this is a good idea. Type it down,
Mm.
and then like never get back to it. So I've got like these incomplete notes
Okay.
that are just sitting
Right.
there. And my wife would tell you, I've got notebooks upon notebooks of stuff, like little drawings, and like like I always have these sticky pads
Mm-hmm.
that I just write something down and literally stick it right into the game book, and then close the game book. Forget it's there. I come back to it 6 months later. Who wrote this? 'Cause I don't remember what this idea was.
You're like the guy from Memento.
It's one of those things like I've had ideas to like sort of I've had ideas to sort of try and make my own system, but I'm like I don't know how to be able to pull that off yet. I've got ideas of how I would want to do it, because like I love the idea of being able to have multiple genres but still run on one system, where you can be able to like take that character and just transport it into whatever game you're playing.
Sure.
But then also like still have tons of different genres, and still having different storyline for each of those genres that I've like played out at the same time, trying to figure out the games that I do like, because I do like one of the games I really love is Tales from the Loop by Free League.
Yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
Love that game.
Right.
I've been able to run it a couple of times. I love Alien. Free League did that one also. I was running that one last year for a club, and I had a great time with that one. But like having different ideas is written down for each of these things, but not really being able to push it any further yet, So I have a lot of ideas I wouldn't mind working through, and even something I could probably mention to you at some point. But like it's just a matter of having the time to sit down and get it done.
Structure it together, put it together into like a
really
complete thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I want to press you on that and say do it. I mean, I think that's, as I mentioned, I think this is an industry that is blossoming and reaching towards something. It may not quite be there yet, because there are ways that it's still like right now you can see Wizards of the Coast is going, ooh, but video games, like, ooh, but microtransactions. And so that means that one of the largest developers of this thing is trying to steer this ship in a direction where a good portion of the community is not interested in going. And I think that's a really good thing. I think it's excellent that Wizards of the Coast is going, but we want microtransactions, and we want artificial intelligent DMs, and we want AI art. I think it's absolutely an open vault of potential, because new creators and new developers, we're going to see the same thing that happened in the video game industry as the AAA companies started leaning into horse armor and whatever other ridiculous, stupid notions they had about charging extra money. Companies would come in like the Darkest Dungeon people, the Squid, Monolith or something. Small companies come in and go, we know how to fill the void that's missing of an interesting game, and we know how to build something the community is looking for. And you get like monster hits where big companies are making card games, small companies come in and go, but here's a really new idea you haven't seen before. And so, if you're thinking about doing this, you probably have the experience to know how to make a system that would be easy for a parent to walk their kid into. Something where the character and the story and the 180-degree arc are captured in it. And as I'm saying it right now, I'm like, I haven't seen that system. I've looked at like 7 or 8 different systems, and I've heard about other people's systems, and I know like there's systems that are attached to campaigns or connected to settings. There are systems that are adjacent. There are systems that are totally detached. You're talking about a thing that's like X-Files looking for the Holy Grail type of thing. And I'm like, ooh, that's kind of cool. Who's my character in this? Am I Indiana Jones? And by the time I get to the end of this, do I believe in the Cup of Christ? That's a relic hunting game or something. Like, I don't know. There's an interesting premise there that you and your experience and your specific understanding of how kids work, and just what you've taught me in this conversation, from your friend who kind of focuses on like who your character is and what they want to do, and you with like keeping the bar high and like keeping notes and stuff. All that stuff is very interesting in a way that I'm like, maybe you should make one of these. Like maybe this is something you. I'm not kidding. Like when you mention like the setting where you're looking for the relics, I'm like, okay. Like I could see chasing down some holy thing or going after some relic that the Nazis found interesting, right? I know I'm not supposed to say that word on YouTube, but whatever. You know, like going after some relic that like the Germans were looking for, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
and then trying to figure out, is it real? Is it not? What is it? It's like an object of power. Like there's a very interesting, like real world adjacent setting that's, you know, that's fantastical, you know, and where you mentioned like you're interested in like various different settings in the same system. I think there's a lot of utility to that, especially as like a parent. You know, like I happen to have the luxury of like lots of free time because I'm making YouTube stuff, whatever. But as I do it, I'm always thinking about like, man, these books are hard to read, right? Like it's hard to find time. You get home from your 8-hour shift and you have like a weekend with your kids and you have dinner time and it's like, okay, do you want to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning looking through a PDF that's 300 pages? Or do you want to just chill with your spouse and kind of go to sleep? If you make a system that someone learns, it's a benefit to them as a consumer to make more settings adjacent to it. Because you mentioned, right, like Alien, once you know Tales from the Loop, you basically know Alien, you basically know Forbidden Lands, you basically know, I don't know, 3 other Coriolis. And I'm like, that is pro-consumer game design right there. And I support Free League in doing it. You might have something in you that is compelling and interesting and might be that thing that satisfies your creative desire. So I'd say, Frankie, make a game. I'd be interested to see what you come up with, you know? Is that something you think you would actually be interested in doing?
As long as I have the time to really focus on it, I've got ideas. Right. It's just a matter of getting everything from here onto paper, you know. But yeah, like I got to go soon to try and pick up my son from school.
My care receiver mentioned me a while ago, or messaged me a while ago, and I need to respond back to them. But I really enjoyed this discussion with you, and you've taught me about 4 or 5 things that I can qualify or quantify, and that's very helpful. I really appreciate it. If anyone else is watching this thing and wants to get a hold of you somehow, is there some way they can message you on Discord or something? Or
Discord. I mean, I'll be in the group chat there. So even if I don't respond right away, just you know, tag me in the message and I'll respond there.
Okay. So are you in my Discord? You're in the members list on. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for Frankie and you want to hit him up and you want to talk to him more and you want to pressure him into building his own game system like I'm doing, you can check there. The link to my Discord will be up in whatever the about section. I think it's the only link that I have there. But Frankie, I really appreciate the time you've given me talking about this. And I'm going to speak with the other 2 or 3 creators that I've spoken with who are making games and have them private message you to maybe get you in, because I know a bunch of them are doing play testing right now, and it might be something that you have time for, might not be something you have time for, but I'm sure your input and your insight would be helpful. So
definitely. Definitely. No, thank you for having me on. Seriously.
No worries at all. I appreciate you being patient with me on timing. I'm sorry I forgot about our meeting today. I definitely need to get on the calendar on Discord so that it reminds me. Right, so I'm going to end the stream now and then say goodbye to Frankie after that. But thank you all for hanging out and listening to us chat. Hopefully some of this information is helpful for you if you're trying to get yourself playing with. I'm looking at this camera. I don't know why I am. If you're trying to get playing with your kids or friends' kids or nieces and nephews, something like that, I think the suggestion to lean into the character and building the character and writing character stuff is a good way to do it. And I think my inroad of trying to go war games is totally wrong. So I appreciate this pushback. I'm gonna stop the streaming there. God bless you. Have a good day.